Hello, my name is Arthur, and in this video we're going to make a fire simulation to make an animation for Godot for our enemy to be able to shoot fire. So we'll just get right started. We're going with quick smoke. We're going to take our cube and scale it down a whole bunch. So we'll get that pretty small, doesn't need to be big. We'll get our domain, we'll grab that along Z and pull it up. In our domain, right away, one of the first things we should do is set up our temporary directory. I have a desktop directory I like to put this stuff into. That way I'm not leaving temporary files and large bakes sitting around. So I'm going to do a simulation that's 15 frames long. So our animation should be around 15 frames long. Now with our smoke domain, one of the first things to do is to set up in the shading panel. So we're going to add an input, which is volume info. We'll take that. We'll add a converter. We need a math converter. And I don't know what happened to that math converter. Decided to go way up there for some reason. This should be set to multiply, I believe. And hopefully this all works out. A little rusty with smoke or fire simulations. So we're going to go converter and a color ramp. On the color ramp, let's get in a little closer. We're going to add a third slider, so we just click the plus button there. And then pick a color for that. That's going to be sort of in the dark orangey red area. So something around there. And then this end will turn into a sort of in the light orange area, sort of leaning into yellow. And that should be okay like that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put flame into value, flame into the color ramp. The color ramp will go into emission color, value will go into emission strength, and let's try at 100 is what I've used so far. Then the next thing to do is to pump the multiply into density and see what we get there. I think that's right. Hopefully that's right. Okay, so next thing we need to do is address our flow object. Now what we're going to do with our flow object is we're going to animate the use flow. So at frame 1, we're going to be using the flow. At around frame 9, we're going to key in for not using the flow. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to turn the fire off. So let's turn that to fire. We're going to use sampling substeps at 10 because we're making a really fast animation. And let's bring the fuel up to 3. Then on the smoke domain, we're going to change time scale to 5. We're going to change buoyancy density to 2. We're going to change heat to 2 and vorticity to 0.1. So buoyancy density basically makes it more buoyant under heat. So when we increase this number, the heat will cause it to rise faster. And well, we've doubled the heat. The heat is what's causing the density or the buoyancy. And then vorticity, the root word there is vortex. So more or less it calculates in a heat vortex. So things don't just come straight up. They'll kind of get a little bit of like they're in a vortex of energy from the rising heat kind of deal. Okay, so that pretty much has our settings, and we're just going to move right into a bake here. So we'll go to all. We've set our directory, our frame numbers, so we're going to bake this and see what we get. Okay, what we got is really crude, so we didn't get much here at all. But we can see that it does end. So our animation ends, or our simulation ends, but it's not any good, and the problem with it is in its resolution. So we're going to free that bake, and now we're going to do a real bake at a resolution that is more likely to work. So we're going to use 128 as our resolution. This is going to slow down the bake a lot and give a more resolved image. So we'll get something that's more fire-like. While that's baking, we can have a quick look at how much time we've consumed here. So we've only used 6 minutes. That's pretty good. We should be able to render an image and get an idea if it's going to work in Godot. So we can open up Godot right now. We'll get our demo opened up, and we'll open up level 1, because that's where we're going to want to see the background that we have to see the fire against. So we'll just get back into Blender. It's still baking away. Not a lot to do while we're baking. Everything's frozen, so I can't even really go over settings very much. Aside from vorticity, the other setting I've used is noise. That adds a little bit of baking time too, but can also make a nice effect, especially if we're doing something like explosions. And I have previous videos covering an explosion. So we're on the last couple of frames here, and then we should be able to render an image. And that should go to frame 9, I think, is where we'll end up when it bakes. No, it went to, let's see, frame 9 is the last frame that there's fuel. Now what we're going to want to do here is go to the cube and set its visibility so it doesn't show in renders. We don't want that to show in renders. So how have we set up here? We haven't set up cycles. We want transparent. We're going to go 256 by 256. We'll change that later. We'll get our camera. X will be at 0 meters. Z we'll put at 0 meters. X at 90 degrees for its angle. Z at 0 degrees. If we look through the camera, we should be pretty close. Let's back off a little bit. We'll raise that up. Can zoom in some. F12 to do a render. We'll see what we get. Now, a lot of what we get depends on how we set up in shading. So, hopefully, if the shading is set up correctly, this will look good in Godot. And if not, it's not going to look that good in Godot. It'll actually be very transparent and not have enough graphic to it at all. So we'll save that into Godot. That should be right there. We'll see if we get a bright looking color or not. That is, I think that's a fairly reasonable result. And I don't know, let's see here. How much time do we have? We're at 9 minutes. Let's try rendering one of the earlier frames. We'll F12 on that. We'll see what we have on this image. Save as. We'll overwrite and see how that looks. So that has a pretty good color. It has a little bit of transparency to it. So I think we should be able to work with that. So let's just close down Godot. And hopefully the animation we come up with here is going to be suitable. So let's get an idea of where we're at a higher frame. If we look through, let's back off a bit. We'll need to back off some. Lower this down. Frame 15 is still a little bit out of the scene there. Might want to back off a little bit and then come down a little bit. Maybe just a little bit further back. So that should get us all of our images. That should pretty much just be a little bit of smoke kind of deal. Hardly show up anything at all. May show up in... So let's see, 12, 13. So we're not getting any real smoke density here. So let's see what our last fadeaway picture is like. That's okay. We'll come back. Give us an idea for how the flame is going to fade out. Animation could perhaps use a little tweaking. But overall, I think that that's going to work out. So I'll render these images up and we'll have a look at them in the next video in GIMP. And until then, take care.